Welcome to Story Sirens, the podcast where we deep dive into myths and legends from around the world. I'm Yenny, and unfortunately, Sarah isn't going to be with us here today, but don't worry, I will try my best. So, real quick, we're gonna get into it. Want some exclusive perks from us like extra bonus content, early access, and more? Check out Apple Podcasts or Ko-fi, and for $3.99 a month, become a Siren Seeker. Plus, if you're currently subscribed via Apple, make sure to email us at storysirens@gmail.com with proof of your subscription. I promise all we need is a screenshot, so we can give you all your deserved goodies. And that's not all. Have a specific topic you'd like for us to cover? Drop a comment below or email us. We'd love to discuss your fave myth on the show, especially if you've had an encounter with said myth. That'd be really cool. We'd love to have you be a part of our podcast. Now, just recently, our friends at Penguin Random House reached out to us again and asked if we'd cover the Greek myth of Medusa on our show. But we've already covered in detail all about Medusa back in episode 48, titled Medusa, a Tragic Greek Myth. But come on now, there wasn't a super cool indie bestseller book by the name of I, Medusa, written by Ayana Gray out yet. And getting to read Ayana's novel made us want to revisit Medusa just one more time. So, because of that, we're going to give you a quick recap of who our Greek girlie is. But hey, stay with us because we've got Ayana coming out to hang out with me after this trip down memory lane, okay? All right, guys, settle down. Let's recap Medusa, shall we? Medusa was the daughter of the sea god Phorcys and Ceto, and sister to Echidna, Grace, and Ladon. Her 3 siblings were born as monsters, terrifying ones at that. But Medusa was different. She wasn't like the other girls, y'all. She was born mortal and beautiful. Unlike her sisters, which is basically like every new young adult novel. But hey, you know what? Poseidon becomes very interested in Medusa and her beauty, specifically her hair, and decides to take her out to Athena's temple, where then she becomes instantly pregnant. Okay? Yeah. Athena punishes Medusa by taking away her beauty and making her gorgeous locks of hair turn into slithering snakes. Now a frightening monster, she became so cruel that should any living thing look at her, they would turn to stone. This awful transformation would give Medusa a new title, gorgon. A gorgon is a type of monster in Greek myth, so rare that there's only 3 of them. Stheno, Uriel, and Medusa. The 3 were depicted as terrifying winged female creatures with a rounded face, flat nose, and serpent-filled hair. For some reason, I'm thinking about a pug with wings and then snakes for hair. I don't know. Medusa's reign of terror does not last, for a hero by the name of Perseus, with the aid of Athena and Hermes, slays Medusa and decapitates her. Yep. Unlike her Gorgon sisters, Medusa was still mortal, yet the powers she had acquired after Athena's curse remained. Athena imbues Medusa's head into the shield, forming Zeus's Aegis, which is able to petrify anyone who stares at it. Her blood is given to Asclepius, god of medicine, who uses the blood on the left side of her body to take people's lives, and the blood on her right side to raise the dead. Athena also saves some of Medusa's blood and a single strand of snake hair. While we don't condone Medusa spending her Gorgon days petrifying innocent lives, we also see the story of Medusa as a tragedy. She really did not ask to be born beautiful, attract a god, and then have Athena literally punish her even in death. Good recap, guys. We did it. For those who are new, this is a quick little fun fact about our sassy slithering and slaying Gorgon. Sarah isn't here to tell me that my puns are bad. Now, before I go ahead and start my interview with Ayana, here's a quick synopsis of her book, I, Medusa. Medi has spent her whole life as a footnote in someone else's story, out of place next to her beautiful, immortal sisters and her parents, both gods, albeit minor ones. She dreams of leaving her family's island for a life of adventure. So when she catches the eye of the goddess Athena, who invites her to train as an esteemed priestess in her temple, Medi leaps at the chance to see the world beyond her home. In the colorful market streets of Athens and the clandestine chambers of the temple, Medi flourishes in her role as Athena's favored acolyte, getting her first taste of purpose and power. But when she is noticed by another Olympian, Poseidon, the course of Medi's promising future is suddenly and irrevocably altered. When her locks are transformed into snakes as punishment for a crime she did not commit, Medusa must embrace a new identity, not as a victim, but as a vigilante, and with it, the chance to write her own story as mortal, martyr, and myth. Exploding with rage, heartbreak, and love, I, Medusa portrays a young woman caught in the cross currents between her heart's deepest desires and the cruel, careless games the Olympian gods play. Alrighty then, after that awesomely awesome read by yours truly, let's go ahead and start this interview. Ayana, it's so wonderful to have you be a part of our show. We read your book, and we've got to say, wow, there's a lot of things. But first and foremost, please, could you tell us a bit about yourself and how it is that you became an author?
Sure. So hello, my name is Ayana Gray. I'm also just thank you for having me on. Uh, my name is Ayana, and I am an author. I've been an author for this year will be year 6, actually.
Nice.
And I primarily write fantasy. I like writing stories that deal in myth and folklore. So my latest book, I, Medusa, is kind of an ode to that. It's a villain origin story that reimagines the iconic Medusa from Greek
Mm-hmm.
mythology as a young woman slash girl caught between the rivaling gods. So that's I, Medusa. I also have 3 other books in YA: Beasts of Prey, Beasts of Ruin, Beasts
Yes, I
of
was
War.
looking at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are more like big epic adventure fantasy about a beastkeeper at a magical zoo and a warrior in training who have to go into a magical jungle to find a monster. So
Love that.
slightly younger but still very magical. So that's me. Those are my books. I live in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm a Southern girl.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
I always make a point of mentioning that too. I am but a Southern woman.
That's
Um,
good. So are we. I'm from Florida, and Sarah, she's not here, but Sarah is from Texas. So
yep.
we've got,
So I'm in good company.
yes,
Um, when I talk too much, I'm like, I'm sorry, but we like to chat as
we
Southerners.
do.
So,
We do. It's a
um,
thing that has. But look, because
yeah.
we chat, we also write, and we also become authors and creatives. So
And I
technically,
and I think Southerners are some of the best storytellers. So
very
I know I'm
true.
in good company. Um,
Yeah.
as far as how I guess became an author, like what I always say is I became an author in 2020 when I signed my first book deal, but I've been a storyteller my whole life. Before I
Mm.
knew how to write, I would draw pictures to tell stories, and before
Mm-hmm.
that, I would tell stories orally. I would listen to stories from like my grandparents, my parents, people
Nice.
around me, my teachers, my friends. It's just been something that I've always loved to do, and then I've progressed as I've gotten older. So we went
Right.
orally to drawing to writing, and I would start stories but never finished any.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did in 2018 was I found a critique partner through social media, and we participated in a pitching event online called DV Pit. Unfortunately, it no longer
Oh.
exists, but I pitched my project during that event and found an agent through that, and then we
Oh
revised.
my God.
And yeah, and then about a year after that, so after a year after 2019, that's when I got my first book deal. So
Look at that. Meant to be. Meant to be then. It's always been within you. And honestly, I did want to ask, what was the reason for choosing Medusa? Because I feel like it's true. Like, we actually did an episode about Medusa back on
ooh,
episode 48. And when I did it, I was left saying, like, man, She's so misunderstood. Like
Mhm.
it's a very sad story. There's nothing happy about
Yeah.
Medusa's story.
Yeah, so I, like a lot of fantasy writers, like a lot of kids, I had a Greek mythology phase but mine just never went away.
Yeah.
I've always loved mythology, and then Greek mythology, Greco-Roman mythology was the first mythology that I was exposed to. So I've
Mhm.
always known it best.
Yeah.
Um, and then of the many stories, I've always found Medusa to be one of the most compelling figures in Greek mythology.
Mhm.
She the Minotaur, I think the story of the Minotaur was my favorite as a kid, but Medusa was kind of neck and neck.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I remained curious about her. She's this huge pop culture figure that we see
She
all over
really
the place.
is.
She's the symbol for Versace, of course,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
see her in comics, like Wonder Woman fights her in one of the comics, and she's just become this symbol that's kind of bigger than life. And I was curious about her and curious about where she might have lived. I found out that there was kind of no consensus about where she might have lived.
Nothing. Very, very few details about
Yeah.
Medusa.
For someone who's so well known, there's surprisingly little like that's part of her true canon. And
Yeah.
I'm putting quotes around true canon because there are different versions of her
Of
story.
course.
Yeah, so there were all these gaps, and as a writer, I get excited when I see gaps because it leaves room for the imagination to fill them in.
Right.
So I got really excited and started kind of outlining this idea, got more and more excited, and then my agent was like, "I think we should try to sell this." And
I think this is a good idea.
yeah,
And you're like,
at a,
yes.
at a time when I wasn't sure, Greek mythology retellings have had really big moments. We think of like
Uh-huh.
Madeline Miller and Jennifer Saint. So I was concerned that maybe nobody would be interested in another Medusa retelling because there are others.
Right, right.
And I've been really wonderfully surprised that people have enjoyed the book and it's resonated with people.
I truly loved it. There was so many I can't give spoilers. I promised myself I wouldn't, but there's a lot of pages that you're like, "Oh my gosh." And then other pages that you're like, "Oh my gosh." And then that's how I felt reading the whole time. I was just going,
Oh, good.
"Ayana." I just kept reading. I was like, "Yes, okay." So now I am laughing, but there's themes of identity, freedom to choose, assault, and
Mhm.
honestly, what I liked most is that you really showcase the unfair trials that women, even today, still constantly go through. Now, can you tell us, without giving spoilers, can you tell us a little bit more about these theme choices that, you decided to choose?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult for me to look at my own work objectively, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time very close to it. But I think the reason stories like the myth of Medusa and other figures from these ancient stories still resonate is because we can see ourselves in them.
For sure.
And it's been interesting because there are all these different entry points. I never
Mm-hmm.
tell readers, this is the message I want you to take away because reading is
Mm-hmm.
incredibly personal. But I think many of us know what it's like to be on the cusp of adulthood/childhood, and it's a very awkward, uncomfortable phase where you're not quite sure how to navigate. Many of
Mm-hmm.
us know what it's like to, for those of us who grew up in small towns, to go out into the big city and suddenly you're cast into
You're
this different
thrown in.
environment, and other kids, other people know more than you do about certain things,
Yeah.
and you're, navigating first relationships, situationships, and it's not always nice. It can be a mess. It can
Yeah.
be traumatic. Dealing with consent, and I don't just mean sexually. I mean like learning what our boundaries and our comforts
Yeah.
are. That's all part of that awkward in between adolescence and adulthood phase that I don't think
Mm-hmm.
we talk about a lot, but it can be such an important era of people's lives.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And I really liked how you wrote it in Medusa's, you know, there was a specific scene in the beginning of the book where she's staring at something that's happening, and it
mhm.
was so uncomfortable to read because I felt myself there. I was like, I know what that feels like to like see something and be like, you're kind of deer in headlights, you don't know. And as the book
Mhm.
progresses, I think you did a wonderful job in making the reader feel like they can definitely put themselves in Medi's eyes and life and be like, oh my God, this is happening. And I feel like a lot of the times authors don't take the opportunity to make the reader feel exactly what that character is feeling, and I felt that.
Mm. Oh,
So
good.
kudos to you. I really did love the book.
Thank you.
And as a sister myself, I did notice strong theme of sisterhood. In fact, any Medusa lover knows that Medusa and her sisters, her Gorgon sisters, are a big deal. Now,
Mhm.
do you have siblings? And if you do, did you kind of see yourself in the three together? How was that? How was writing that?
Yeah, so I do have 2 siblings. I have a
Oh,
younger brother and a younger sister. Actually, I Medusa is dedicated to my younger sister.
oh,
There's a
love
dedication
that.
for it at the beginning, and I definitely drew from that. I mean, I'm the oldest of 3. I very much give eldest daughter energy,
Mm-hmm.
and I drew from that, of course. Not to say that Steno and Euryale are just like my brother and sister, but
Right.
I think sometimes we paint this very idealized picture of what it is like to have brothers and or sisters, and it's
Uh-huh.
very cute and whimsical, and I always get annoyed when books are like, "Hey, brother, how are you, sister?" And I'm like, "That's
Yeah,
not
because
how we
that's not,
not real."
no.
Um, Sisterhood, brotherhood, siblinghood is messy. You're growing up with
Very.
another person trying to figure themselves out, and so I wanted this book to be like a real ode to sisterhood, not just
Mm-hmm.
the idealized version of
Right.
sisterhood. So Medi is the youngest of 3, and she has 2 older sisters who, in addition to being older and cool and suave and beautiful, they're also immortal, and
Yeah.
she's not. And so there's an instant othering that's happening where she automatically
Right.
is isolated from the rest of her family because she knows that she's going to die someday and time is finite for her. Whereas for her parents and her siblings and all the gods around her that she's growing up with,
Mm-hmm.
they all are like, "What's the rush? We're not in a hurry."
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it creates this contrast and we see it later because she's felt so isolated and othered within her own family. It makes it easy for other figures who will go unnamed to take advantage of that and
Of
exploit that,
course.
which is what we see in real life all the time.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people feel I've met people that tell me I will never show or tell anybody about my weakness because I know they can use it against me.
Mhm.
And a sense of vulnerability that Medi still has a piece of her, and she is able to have that with other people, but it is really sad. The whole book is sad.
Yeah,
The whole book is sad,
it's
but
a
so is
tragedy.
Medusa's whole story. Now,
Mhm.
we'd like to think, and by we I mean Sarah and I, who's here listening,
Yeah.
hopefully,
She's
we'd
here in
like to
spirit.
think, yeah, in spirit, we'd like to think Medusa was unfairly punished from the beginning. I mean,
Mhm.
Athena went too far. What are your thoughts on the goddess of wisdom? Because a lot of people are super like, I love Athena, and then there's others that are
Yeah,
like, well,
she's
Athena's not really nice to mortals. So,
she's polarizing. I mean, all of the gods are polarizing. And
right.
if you read I Medusa, and after you finish, if you go to the back, there's an author's note where I talk about um, the fact that certain myths have been retold by different people,
Mm-hmm.
and the version of Medusa that we know, where she's wronged by Athena, is actually a Roman interpretation of her story.
Oh.
Not to get too into the weeds, but it was written by Ovid, a Roman poet who very like let his politics influence his
Yeah.
writing, which a lot of writers do, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very anti-authoritarian, and so he expressed his anti-authoritarian sentiments in his work. So the gods are not painted very favorably
Yeah.
in his versions of stories, which is why Athena is not painted favorably in Medusa's story. All that context I think matters. But and I think, by the way, like, to ask a writer not to have their politics and their biases in their work is kind of silly. We all do
Right.
it.
Yeah.
That's a super roundabout way of saying how to talk about Athena. In a lot of versions of the story of Medusa, Athena is painted as just objectively evil. And in I Medusa, she does some pretty terrible things, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
But what I hoped, I don't know if it always comes across, but what I hoped we see in I Medusa is that almost every woman, every female, girl, woman figure in this book is in some way trapped. And they
Right.
respond to being trapped in different ways. Her mother has some substance abuse issues. That's how she
Right.
deals with the fact that she's trapped. Her sisters have a lot of rage that we see later. Medi inherits
Mm-hmm.
that rage. For Athena, She's trapped because although she's a very powerful goddess, there are still male gods who are more powerful. And I think she, for me anyway, symbolizes what we see sometimes in the girl boss culture, where
Right.
certain women achieve in these male dominated spaces, and you're expecting them to be like super pro girl, but they end up actually contributing to a lot of
To a lot of that.
patriarchal
Yeah.
views, um, not necessarily on purpose, but because they're trying to survive themselves. It doesn't make
Right.
what they're doing right, but we understand that they are just as trapped in
It's a
some
gray
way.
area because sometimes it's very difficult.
Yeah.
I grew up in corporate lifestyle, and you saw
Yep.
that a lot because for every one woman on the seat, there was seven men there, and usually that was the only woman that was in the
Yeah.
conference room.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's very, sometimes I feel um like you said, that we can't take it too much. Like, okay, Athena's like super bad because she's doing what she thinks and what she knows to be right, because she has to also keep to herself. She can't be seen as weak. She
Hmm.
can't be seen as like being okay with someone, desecrating their temple or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so I understand that. And talking about Medusa again, she does petrify innocent lives. She does do things she
Mhm.
shouldn't do, but how do you believe, what are your thoughts on that? Because anger sometimes makes us do things that we wouldn't for sure do if it wasn't for the fact that we were so angry, and then afterwards we're kind of like, why did we do that?
Yeah.
Why, the guilt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the goal of the story is not to create a version of Medusa who's flawless. I
Right.
think this is part of the problem too. We hold, especially young people, we hold young people to impossible moral standards. We expect them to never mess up. We expect them to know
Right.
better. We expect them not to ever make a bad choice, and that's just not realistic. So I
Mhm.
deliberately created a version of Medi, and then she becomes Medusa, who is flawed, who doesn't always have emotional intelligence. But we also see that sometimes, um, the way I've been talking about it lately is we see the crash out moments, but we don't see what led up to the crash out.
Right.
And it's
Right.
sometimes when we see the lead up to a thing, we can then say, okay, I understand
Right.
why this happened. I don't necessarily agree with everything,
Mhm.
but I understand the why, and I understand how this could have been prevented if we had gone back further and if we had put a stop to certain things sooner. Um, it's easy to vilify people in the moment,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I hope that this book is one of those books that gets people to say, what's the backstory here? Where's the context?
Right. It definitely left me thinking, and it did soften a piece of me, because after, hearing the story of Medusa, you're just like, oh my God, this is totally unfair. But who's in the right? Who's in the wrong? There's
Mhm.
so many things to talk about with that. And we are pressed for time. So we're going to our last question,
Okay.
which is going to be, you told me the Minotaur was one of your other Greek myth faves. Now, question, from any other culture, from any other country, is there a myth that also intrigues you that you're just like, oh my God, I love this and I might maybe write about it?
Oh gosh, I mean, I've got a folder full of ideas, of course. Let's see. I don't know if there's, I mean, I wrote three giant books full of mythology across the African continent and all of the cool monsters.
Oh,
Like, you grow up with Pegasus, the winged
yeah.
horse. You grow up hearing about trolls. You grow up hearing about, specific, often European creatures. But I always love learning about the monsters and the animals and the mythical beings from other places around the world. I put
Right.
a ton of them into Beasts of Prey. And I also think, sorry, this is like another long answer, but
No,
I
we
also
love
think
them.
it's really fascinating to me when you see the same figures in different
Yes.
cultures with different names, and you're like, how did this
Mm-hmm.
travel all the way over here?
Yes.
A really good friend, one of my best friends is Margaret Owen. She's an author. She wrote Little Thieves and The Merciful Crow and many other books. And she wrote, so Little Thieves is like Germanic folklore,
Mm-hmm.
fantasy, really great series. And she has creatures in that book. One, I can't remember the exact name, but it's like these creatures that wait till you're sleeping and then they kind of possess you and ride you. And that's where
Uh-huh.
nightmare, the idea of nightmares
Yeah.
come. They ride you like a
Yes.
mare. Anyway, it's interesting because there's a similar creature. Um, in African American folklore, when you talk about haints, and how they wait till you're sleeping and kind of can possess you. And
We
I
actually did an episode, and I think we did cover. I'm pretty sure
yeah.
we did cover because we were covering different types of nightmares, and one of them being
Mhm.
that they sit on top of you, and so you feel it in your
Yeah.
chest, and you're just
Yeah,
there
and
staring at them.
in the tradition, keeping salt in your house,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see some houses that have blue bottles and painted the ceilings are painted blue to mimic the sky to keep them away. Really cool
Oh.
things that have like meshed into real culture and real architecture.
Uh-huh.
But I think it is so cool that you have the same creature that does almost the same thing, but in totally different parts of the world, and you wonder how it
Fascinating.
traveled. So
Yeah.
I'm into mythical beings at
I
the end of
love
the day.
that. We love that you're into it because then you make these great books that
Thank
we
you.
keep having. We have to read them. Well, Ayana, thank you so much for tuning in and staying with us. And, honestly, it's been such an awesome pleasure to read that book. Thank you to Penguin Random House for letting us be able to interview you. And also, is there anything you would like to leave with potential readers and listeners out there?
Ooh, okay. Yes. So I am on social media at Ayana Gray with a little underscore at the end. That's where you can get most book news. And I do have another book coming out September 1st,
Ooh.
actually. Gilded Age fantasy about a reporter who makes a deal with a sorcerer to prove his innocence in a scandal in exchange for the money she needs to save her newspaper.
Ooh, and then they
So
kiss?
and maybe they kiss. And it's my ode to Howl Pendragon. If you liked Howl's Moving Castle and like
My
ridiculous,
favorite.
ridiculous flamboyant sorcerers.
Yes.
So that's called Hawk and Sparrow, and it is out September 1st.
How
So that is my next
fun!
thing that I'm excited to share.
Oh, so great. Thank you so much. And guys, stay tuned for your siren call. But just so you know, it's going to be exactly what you think it is, which is to buy Ayana's book. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you like the interview? Ah, wasn't she great? Okay, so here's your siren call, guys. Go buy I, Medusa by Ayana Gray at your local bookstore. You can also purchase her book directly from the Penguin Random House website or visit Ayana Gray's website at www.ayanagray.com. Looking forward to hanging out next week for a very special, very perhaps UFO-y episode? I won't say anything else. See you soon. Bye. Special thanks to our supporters, Lily Crank and TL Stevens. And thank you to our subscribers, Eric Tomlinson and others. We're waiting for your email so that we can go ahead and put your name on the credits. Thanks for listening to Story Sirens. You can follow us on Instagram at Story Sirens Podcast. Want to support us? Send us a cup of Ko-fi by searching ko-fi.com/storysirens. We've got lots of treats for those who become siren seekers. All research materials can be found in the episode summary. Music by Donald Guzzi and artwork by Alexis Torres. Story Sirens is a Feather and Fin production. See you soon.